Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Sammons,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Madigan, Ms. Marlin,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Smythe,
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, October 7th, 2013.
So move.
I'll second.
Motion by Ammons, seconded by Roberts. Any additions or corrections? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda?
There we go.
I'd like to put a staff report, reports of officers early, because I'd like to get a report from Robert Myers. His last day is tomorrow, and he'd like to fill us in on an important topic that we're going to be discussing later. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So we'll do that right after, right before reports of standing committees, okay? Petitions and communications. I have Carletta Donaldson.
It's Carletta Donaldson, 406 East Brookins Drive in Urbana. I want to confirm one thing, that the next Urbana City Council and Mayor Goals meeting will be November 4th at 5:30. Is that correct? Okay. That's one thing that I want to confirm, especially for the listening audience. If you have concerns, do get them to your council rep or to the council members and or the mayor. And I also looked at this, one other way to reduce monies, and this is not the first time, but I look at this document here that probably could have been dual-sided as not to waste, so that's one thing that we need to think about as well, is when we're trying to save money with the budget. That could have been easily two-sided. I think that's it. Oh, and my one question about Carl. On the insurance for employees for the city, do they actually go through Carl's at Health Alliance or / Carl, or? That was one thing that I had a question on.
We have Carl Health Alliance right now,
Okay.
and we are, we renew our insurance, look for different
Okay. and I
systems,
understand
whatever, effective December 1st. So we're in the middle of doing that.
that. Okay. Which may look similar to the state employees thing, because I'm sure there will be some people who have had Carl for a while who may want to keep. So do keep that in mind as you look for other insurance carriers as well. And then the last thing, I do want to thank Mr. Roberts. The earlier meeting, and I was basically thinking the same way I'm sure others were, when you talk about facilities and planning, but it was made clear once Carol Ammons and the mayor mentioned, if you need to hire someone in to do the facilities planning, and of course, a lot of you are like, yes, absolutely. But in the meantime, if it's not something that's going to be right away, I personally, and I'm sure a lot of others feel, that you don't need to spend the money for someone to do a facilities plan if that's not in the immediate future. Discuss it and see where you'll go, and then go from there once you're ready to do something about the facilities. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood do not wish to speak, but they would like to express their concern about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. Carol McCusick.
Carol McCusick, 1907 North Cunningham, talking about the environmental side of the municipal electric aggregation program. We're in a 2-year contract that goes until June 2014, and under that contract there is a municipal fee, and so I think it's a legal question whether, if there's nothing said about what the fee gets assigned to, is there anything in our in the rules for governments in the state of Illinois, say, or in our rules for Urbana, that says that that sort of had to be part of the ordinance, like part of setting up the first municipal electric aggregation. So that was a legal question about the first contracts, because I'm thinking of Mike Munson saying to the council in connection with working up stuff for contracts that were going to be following June 2014, like continuing onward from there, that it was a tough budget time, and that's the and for that reason, the municipal fee from the first contract, which is ongoing, you know, it's like coming in every month supposedly through June 2014. So it's, but based on what Mike was saying, because it was, I suppose in the administration you were feeling like it was a tough budget year, it was, there was a default for it of the putting it in the general fund. So, okay, that's, I guess I hope that is clear what I'm asking about. Is there any legal thing that would say that that would be, that it had to be like part of your legislation when you designed the first contracts for the first 2 years, because that money would be part of the. I mean, I think that what you can do with, okay, what you can do in a positive way or in a constructive way for the environment, would be part of the calculation of whether the municipal electric aggregation program makes sense at all, because it just may be just really wringing the value out of the environment for, you know, just for cash now. And so that's about all I'll say about MEA, but one of the municipal electric aggregation is because I want to move on to something which is the zoning ordinance republication that came to attention because there was a multi-part text amendment that you know, council took up where Plan Commission left off, and
You have 1 minute, Ms. McCusick.
I was at the Plan Commission meeting that sent it on to the City Council, and so I can say that they did not see it as, this is how, maybe I have this idea that there are a lot of government information issues, you know, like that have a lot to do with being easier on the environment, you know, and as well as being issues of, you know, keeping people on the same page and so having better democracy. And I would like to see the municipal electric aggregation fee money, that the city's collecting. I wonder if I could have more time.
I would move for 2 more minutes.
Sure, I'll go ahead with that.
Okay, about this, you know, has thing of the zoning ordinance having, you know, from time to time, and ordinances, I mean, amendments to it, changes to that body of of laws which, affect different parts of it. I guess you're calling that a multi-part amendment, so that unless all those changes get kind of shuffled in immediately, you don't have the new picture of what you're building on, literally building on, because people are architects and building on that. So it's just totally logical, or nothing has,
One more minute, Ms. McCusick.
I haven't figured out any reason that you wouldn't just republish it online as of the date. In other words, shuffle in the new parts, the date that those laws became effective, and have the new republished version online, and an archive of the markups for each of the but those would, okay. What? But that issue was not perceived as being an issue in the Plan Commission that sent this last text amendment on to you on September 3rd that you saw again at September 9th and September 16th.
To answer your question, there's no legal requirement for the county, for the city fee, but we do have costs, and including that fee, that people who live in Urbana did save, I think it was $1 million in the first year. So it was a win-win for the people who live here and the city. But there's no legal requirement, it was a judgment.
No legal requirement of where.
Beg your pardon? Would you like to ask another question?
No legal requirement of where to put the money.
No. I mean,
Okay.
no legal requirement to have it, but we certainly are in a budget crunch, so we want to cover our costs. Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address the Urbana City Council? Okay, why don't we move on and have Robert Myers give us a discussion, a summary, and let's give him a standing ovation.
Gosh, thank you.
We're sorry to see you leave.
Yeah, you better wait till after I speak and see see what I say
That's why we're
first,
doing
and then
it
maybe
first.
might want to decide it then. Well, I have contacted council members and the mayor recently to let you know that I'm available to answer questions about billboards and legal issues. And the reason is because I understand that Adams Outdoor Advertising is interested in possibly changing the city's ordinance to allow some billboards to be converted to digital billboards. And you might see that in Champaign. They've already taken that step, and so they allow that. I just want to give you a little bit of background. I don't want to make a huge presentation, but I thought I would summarize it. As a matter of fact, the city staff contacted a recognized national leader on legal issues of digital billboards, and his name is Professor Daniel Mendelker, and he teaches at Washington University in St. Louis. In fact, he's consulted with, I don't know, 75 to 100 different municipalities on questions about signage and billboard law, and we asked him specifically, is it legal for the city not to allow digital billboards? Is that right? Is that defensible? Well, right's not the exact word. Is it legal, I guess, is the question. And after speaking with our staff and considering our ordinance, he felt like that our ordinance was constitutional and that it's legal. There's not necessarily a right to have digital signs and digital billboards, but of course you have to consider the question whether or not it's legal. Is it right to do so? Is it right to take that next step and to allow digital billboards or not? So you really have to make that decision. But 2007, there was a landmark Supreme Court case in a town in New Hampshire where there was a jewelry store who sued the town because they didn't allow any electronic signage whatsoever. And that was upheld. Part of the rationale was that the city allowed other forms of communication, the static signage, and there was alternative means of communication that the people could take advantage of. Now, so that was some specific advice from Professor Mandelker to the city. I thought I should also let you know that the Federal Highway Administration has been mulling over for years whether or not to allow digital billboards, and so they now allow them along interstates and federal aid highways. And they didn't come out with a specific dictum, but they told states that if you would adopt standards between 8 and 10 second message changes, that would be acceptable in terms of meeting the Highway Beautification Act of 1965. They felt like it wouldn't be a violation of the Highway Beautification Act of 1965. So some states, such as Illinois, have adopted what's called a 10-second rule for billboards along interstates, and they allow those. Champaign allows digital billboards, and I understand it's 10 seconds between those images. I would say once you go electronic, there's really not much turning back, and that's the same kind of with billboards in general, and that's because billboard is in a special class of signage in that it's partly commercial signage, but it's also non-commercial speech as well. And so it plays this dual function. And so it has some protections that other signage doesn't have exactly. And so it's really in a special class. And plus, I would offer that billboard companies have been very successful in lobbying on their behalf for legislation that is beneficial and favorable to billboards and to both statewide and nationally. And so billboards essentially have their own class of special protections. So I would say once you go electronic, I kind of see it as a ratchet going one way. You just have to keep in mind that it's not going to turn back the other way. Cities cannot have non-conforming billboards removed unless they pay for them, and that's both under state law and federal law. So if the city feels like that a particular billboard needs to be removed, the city can have it done so, but it needs to not only pay for the billboard, but also the lease for whatever the period of the lease is, which can be quite expensive. So buying out a billboard can cost, just the static billboards can cost $500,000 each. That's not unusual. So because of that, once billboards are in place, they're around a long time, pretty much. In 2006, we were actually under a moratorium, the city of Urbana was, where we'd had kind of a rush of billboard permits issued in the early 2000s. And we looked at our ordinance and we determined that at that time that under our own rules that 100 plus more billboards could be erected in the city of Urbana. And the council and the mayor at that time felt that that was just too, it was allowed for too many future billboards. That wasn't what our community was looking for in terms of aesthetics and traffic safety and for other reasons. And so we modified our ordinance, and so today, by our best calculations, maybe another 5 to 7 billboards could be erected in the city instead of 100. So there are a few limited opportunities for additional billboards, but it's far fewer than it was at that time. Now, that 2006 ordinance, Adams Outdoor Advertising, it's no secret that they actually sued the city of Urbana, wanted us to basically roll back our ordinance, and they They challenged it on constitutional grounds, and with the help of a lot of very talented attorneys, including Professor Mandelker and our own legal staff and some outside counsel, we changed our ordinance and made it so that all the constitutional objections that outdoor advertising brought up in court was fixed. So our ordinance today has been fixed, and it's constitutional. And I think it's really kind of a model ordinance for signage and billboards in terms of being content neutral, in terms of having clear standards that are cut and dried, that are not, so that there's not any discretion to say yes or no based on other than objective criteria. And that's really what these constitutional concerns really require. They require that there be cut and dried, kind of black and white standards that that new billboards and signs should need to follow. And so that's what we have today. So I feel our ordinance it's a good ordinance. It's has high standards. Is kind of tough, but that's what the community and our council and mayor have asked for in order to maintain our quality of life here in Urbana, and that's what we have today. Now, whether or not certain billboards should be changed out to electronic billboards, you all will have to really decide if that's the way you want to go. The issues that I've seen communities bring up nationwide in terms of electronic signage, a couple of main issues. One, there's a question about glare. If electronic signs are too bright, they can cause glare at nighttime, which is basically glare is when you're looking out on the roadway and you're squinting because there's some sort of bright light that's right in your eyes. That's sometimes a concern, although you can require that billboards have automatic dimming devices on them. That's required by the city of Champaign. The second issue, I would say, and we have not seen this locally. We have not seen this in Champaign, for instance, where they have electronic billboards. But I fear this is coming. So maybe it's just a personal fear of mine. And that is dynamic images. Not just a static image, but when you see basically a television on a pole. Where communities have allowed dynamic signage, whether signs or billboards or whatever, those have been, the jury is not out on that. The studies show that is certainly distracting, and it's what they call longer glances. In other words, when it attracts someone's attention, their eyes are fixed on that image for a longer period of time, and so their eyes are not on the road. I realize there's all kinds of distractions in the car now. There's texting. There's people who are Facebooking. They're eating. They're watching TV and all those sorts of things. But I would say once signage and or billboards start going for the dynamic display, that's definitely a red flag in terms of public safety and concerns. The reason I have a concern about this is in Chicago, you already see that already. Walking around downtown Chicago, you see the signs up on poles, and it's literally just movies and commercials playing and things like that. I suppose that could work in a pedestrian area, but again, once you open the door to it, it's very hard to close the door. So I just thought I would add that. I guess if you have any questions for me, I could be happy to answer them.
What is have you talked with, or probably you have, people in Champaign about how satisfied they are about their life with digital billboards?
I've spoken to Bruce Knight, the Planning Division Director, Rob Kowalski, the Assistant Planning Department Director, and I think they both feel pretty satisfied. What they do in Champaign is they have a trade-off, so that they trade off certain billboards in downtown and along Green Street for the digital billboards. Although I would say it's forced them to change some of their other digital signage laws. Like, for instance, it used to be that regular signs that were digital could change only once every 15 minutes. And then they allow billboards, as requested by Adams Outdoor Advertising, once every 10 seconds. And so then they found themselves, well, what's the rationale for billboard changing every 10 seconds, but the smaller signs every 15 minutes? So then they had to change the 15 minutes to 10 seconds. And now I think they may have even gone less than that because of some lobbying on the part of some concerned businesses. It is, once you go electronic, it can be slippery because what starts out 15 minutes is then 10 seconds, and which is then 3 seconds. And so really, if you're going to allow electronic, which we do in Urbana for on-premise signs, we allow on-premise signs to change once every 3 minutes. And where we have enforcement cases, we'll call up the business, and actually they've been good about, readjusting the signs to once every 3 minutes. So.
We also allow, it seems, on-premise signs to be dynamic. Is that true?
They shouldn't be.
But some are.
If they are, they're not in compliance.
Oh, okay, so they should
Yeah.
they should be reined in. Okay.
Yeah, we if we get a report, we'll call the business and ask them to change it. But technically, it should be an instantaneous message change, no more than once every 3 minutes. Now, sometimes they cheat and they have a transition between, but there is more enforcement involved with electronic signage because of it's so easy to just flip the switch and change the image.
Okay, Bill Brown?
Yeah. You said that under the existing, there were maybe 5 to 7 more locations that could take billboards.
Mm-hmm.
How many are there total right now? Do you know? 30 some?
I should know that. It seems like it's about 40.
40.
in the city of
Is
Urbana.
so that's 40 like faces of billboards, or 40?
40 billboards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because sometimes one pole will have 3 or 4. 70? Okay. Over 70.
Okay. Faces. Okay.
Over 70 faces.
Faces. And then you also mentioned that removal of non-conforming billboards could be $500,000 or more, but that can you still negotiate the removal of billboards, like if we wanted some of the non-conforming removed in exchange for one or two electronic? That doesn't mean we couldn't do that, right? We wouldn't have to pay anything if we made that part of the agreement.
If a sign company or billboard company owner took their signing down on their own accord, that would be fine. That would be permissible. But it's really up to them. Once it's up, it's going to be up a long time, basically until they decide to remove it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Carol Ammons, and then Diane and Dennis.
I know you're leaving us, but I just wanted to find out if there was any place that you can go and look for the actual effects,
Mhm.
right, of digital billboards. Of course, how is there a way to track and see if traffic accidents have happened because of the television watching while you're driving?
Mhm.
No,
Right.
something like that.
Well, luckily we don't have any of in Champaign-Urbana, we don't have any of the ones that are having the dynamic display. The ones in Champaign change every 8 or 9 seconds. I forgot exactly how often that is. 10, okay. And the display is pretty instantaneous. So, but if you want to see that in how that works, there's some locations like at Prospect and Interstate.
Yeah, I've seen it. I just don't know what dynamic then means, because they
Okay.
seem dynamic to me, but
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
What I mean by that is just basically full motion video. Now, we don't have that here, but it's going on in some of the larger metro areas, and I think it's a trend coming down the road for smaller metro areas.
What percentage of the current billboards in Urbana are non-conforming? Do you know?
percentage, I don't have that number, but I could find it out tomorrow. I have it in my office.
Okay. And as far as as far as locations, since basically there's one company in town and the number of new locations are very, very much restricted, what we have is the maximum, pretty much the maximum we would get. So any electronic billboard that came in would replace an existing billboard. Is that correct?
Yes, and I say that because the electronic billboards are so costly, they would have to go in at key locations where there's high traffic counts, because otherwise it doesn't make sense financially. And so there's already billboards at the high traffic count intersections, and so they would need to replace existing ones if they wanted to, if they were allowed to put in new ones, and if they put them in.
And did Champaign negotiate a 2-for-1 swap by any chance? I heard that they wanted to, but, you know, get rid of 2 regular faces for 1 digital.
Yes, that's right. It's 2 faces from either downtown or Green Street.
And so those kinds of terms can be negotiated, and it's constitutional.
Yes, I mean,
Apparently.
Adams has suggested that in the past, and that's what they suggested to the city of Champaign, that they would accept that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dennis and then Mike Madigan.
I can understand the economic benefit for Adams for being interested in the digital display media. What economic benefit does the city of Urbana receive from from billboard display? Is there a tax on it that we levy? Do we receive property tax income from these displays? How does the city itself benefit from this
Right.
change?
The only benefit I know would be indirect. That's because, to my knowledge, they don't pay property taxes. There's not a fee involved other than the sign permit fee. If they benefit a business and say that their sales tax, their retail sales go up, and then there would be additional retail sales revenue associated with that. But I don't think there's any property taxes that are involved or any.
So there's no benefit directly to the city financially?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not directly?
Yeah,
That would come to our general fund or something like that?
right.
Mike Madigan?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say, Robert, I've known you for a very short time, and I've probably been more of a burn your saddle than a proponent, but I think you're an extremely intelligent guy. You've got it going on, and I wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you.
I just want to throw that out there because I know especially on the landmark issues, I've been maybe not along the lines of where a lot of folks are, and I don't want you to misconstrue that as anything personal, because
Sure.
I think you are extremely talented, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Now, on this issue, I think that, first of all, to address the economic benefit to the city, I think there are a couple. First of all, any kind of public service announcements that the city would like to make, we can incorporate, as Eric has pointed out in his email to all of the council members, very appropriately, is that we can require public service announcements to be a part of the rotation. That is a huge benefit to the city. Economic, socially, it's a big benefit. That's not something we can get today when somebody has to get up and stretch vinyl on a billboard. It is a 10-second rotation that can be every few times in the rotation. something that promotes Urbana. That's a big deal. And I think everybody ought to really take that seriously. Here is a company who is saying, for this benefit that will help us, we are willing to help you. And I think it would be really sad for us to not figure out a way to take advantage of that, because we want to promote Urbana as a great place to live, work, and open a business. All right? The other thing is, in my meetings with Adams, who, it should be on the record, everyone should know, was not the original company to sue the city. It was a company that they acquired, and yes, they have had they have had judicial engagement with the city since then, but they acquired the company that had the big issue with the city. I think Adams has come to the council with, has come to the city with a program that will actually reduce the inventory on some of the major streets of the city that we want to make, that everyone on this council has indicated we want to make, we want to beautify as corridors into the city. For example, Lincoln and University. Cunningham and Lincoln are the major thoroughfares into the city from the university, from the interstate into the university. Lincoln being foremost. Lincoln and University has 6 Adams billboards. Adams has indicated to me, as I'm sure they have to others, they are willing to reduce their inventory at that intersection from 6 faces to 2. That is a huge concession, in my estimation, of a business to the city in helping to make a significant intersection in this community much more attractive. It's up to us, obviously, to make the rest of the corridor something that's attractive and something that is appealing to the residents as well as to our visitors. So I think it's very intriguing to me to allow not dynamic. I'm not for dynamic. I'm for static. And that's all they're asking for. 10-second changes, which data across the country bear out that there is not any kind of discernible traffic safety issue from 10-second changes in electronic billboards. So I am, at this point, very supportive. I don't see any reason not to be supportive because it serves 2 purposes. It helps a business that is important to our community thrive. It also helps us reduce the internal inventory of billboards, which helps to beautify the city.
Carol.
I certainly want to look into information in relationship to them. I also want to find out if there's a way for us to find some amicable way for us to work with Adams to meet our needs and their needs at the same time. And so I would hope that the council would be looking for ways to do that. I think signage coming into those 2 corridors is really important. How does that sign look? What do we want the message to be when you come into Lincoln off of 74 or Cunningham. Right now, we still have a little ways to go to make that a, not dynamic, but,
Sure.
but beautified entrance into our city.
Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah,
And we're sorry to see you leaving, and we thank you for all the work you've done here.
You guys
I'm
have
sure
been
you'll do
great.
well.
Yeah, thank you. I mentioned this before, but this council's been great. The mayor's been excellent. So it's by far the best community I've worked in. So I really do appreciate all of you. And we're just here to make a recommendation, and so you just take it into consideration, and that's all that we ask. So you all are the decision makers and policy makers, and we'll just support you the best that we can. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert.
If I can just add, I hope that your situation there is so, I mean, I wish you the best, so I hope that your situation there is good enough that you don't, miss us so much that you think you made a bad move. But that being said, yeah, it was really great having you here.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Unfinished business. We have ordinance number 2013-10-093, an ordinance amending the Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7, regarding the schedule of fees, the annual rental property registration for fiscal 2013-2014. And Libby Tyler is here.
I'm just here to answer any questions. I think it's the same as was at the last meeting.
Eric.
So there is I think a clarification or something because I introduced an amendment last week which was adopted prior to the motion to defer, and I have subsequently been advised by our city attorney that my amendment introduces into the ordinance language that will be setting us adrift in dangerous waters with respect to potential lawsuit. So I have indicated that I am willing to withdraw my amendment. I suppose except, I mean, this is very funny because it didn't get in what was distributed, but it should have. But now I want it back out. So I don't know what the parliamentary thing is, Clark.
You could make a motion. You can make a motion that we do the study, because that will accomplish what you want.
So anyway, I'm willing to have this considered as it is without my amendment, and then after we deal with this, I'd like to make a separate motion to embody the intent of the amendment, but not to put it in an ordinance.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
I have a point of order.
Yes.
My point of order would be I want the parliamentarian to explain to me why this amendment is out of order.
The amendment is not out of order. It's just that it's a legal problem. Kurt, would you like to explain
Okay, then
that?
how about the legal counsel clue us in?
This is basically a direction to staff to perform a study, and it really is better to be in a motion as opposed to being codified in our city code that gets published, that it becomes a law. That the same result can be accomplished in a motion, but the question that it concerns is whether we can establish different fees for different building owners based on our perception that some are more problematic than others, and that creates a question of potential equal protection issue. That you are being charged a fee more than the person next to you who owns a building, because the city might feel that you're not as good a landlord. So it's better to undertake that study without establishing a law that says that this is our position that we want to pursue, using a fee for something that probably should be a fine instead.
Mike?
So then are you suggesting that we don't codify this as an ordinance per se, but what Eric has suggested, which I am in full support of, instead be addressed without being a part of the ordinance?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, not being an attorney, but having long experience in state government, and being a part of and witness to hundreds, if not thousands, of laws which required a governmental body to undertake a study without violating anything that in a state or federal constitution. I guess I'll defer, but I think you're on very shaky ground here to say that a public body cannot embark upon a study that has no legal consequence whatsoever until it's adopted. I guess what I'm trying to say here is I think we ought to be very careful about taking an alderman's suggestion that we codify a requirement that this be studied at the last minute to be questioned constitutionally. I really take exception to that. I think this is this issue could have been addressed to him or to us as a body through email or other communication well before now. He made his motion 2 weeks ago, to my recollection. And for the staff to now suggest that there's a constitutional problem, I think is at the least untimely, probably inappropriate. All we are suggesting is, all Alderman Eric Jacobson is suggesting here is that there be a study of this issue. I cannot, in my wildest analysis of this, understand how that is unconstitutional. He is asking for a study. He's
Mike?
not asking for, I'm not finished. He's not asking for the city to embark upon some kind of inequitable fee structure. He's asking for a study. And this is one of those instances where I strongly feel that the staff is trying to control the council. And I'm going to leave it at that, but it is beyond me how this kind of interpretation can be imposed on this council.
Mike, I would like to point out that when ordinances or when laws are passed, they're drafted by the Legislative Research Bureau, right, in Springfield. And so this is just that the legal department did not review it until today, and they made a suggestion that we could get the study, but it would be better to do it by a motion, and the study will be done rather than include it. So I don't think it's, that the work's not going to get done, because it will get done, but it should have been reviewed by the legal department earlier, but they did not see it,
The
okay?
the Legislative Research Bureau is one mechanism for drafting laws. Any citizen in the state of Illinois is allowed to present a bill. It does not have to be drafted by the Legislative Research Bureau. It can be drafted by any individual. So, yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to be confrontational here. I'm just saying I really am a bit taken aback by this 11th hour decision by the staff to present to the council that this item is somehow unconstitutional, which I think is a gross stretch.
I don't think he said unconstitutional. He just said it would create a legal question that we might as well not raise for ourselves, because we could just get the same job done without going through all that.
Well, fair enough.
That was the only thing.
So,
Okay, Eric.
yeah, so I think the issue is, and I agree with Mike. Obviously, this should have been taken care of much earlier. My amendment should have been, since it was adopted by the council, should have been put in the ordinance as it was distributed, and it never was, and I noticed that when I was going through my packet, and so I asked for it to be inserted as I had done, as I had presented it. In fact, Libby and Laurel asked me when we were up at the Illinois Municipal League meeting, did I really still want that in there? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I do feel that it was poorly handled. On the other hand, what was in Jim's memo on this, he suggested, it was his legal opinion that by putting something into, that by suggesting that something could be put into a fee structure, by putting language into an ordinance that suggested that something could be put in a fee structure that had a couple of levels of fees based on the quality of the landlord and the record of the landlord, that might open us up to legal action. And maybe it would. I don't know. I think that, that's, but I am deferring, as I've done previously. Apparently I'm quite a reckless person and continually exposing us to legal action, but I deferred, I deferred on this I am willing to defer on this particular point as long as the study gets done. I think one of the points that Jim made was that that fee structure should be based on costs. Well, I think it would be very reasonable, Libby and Laurel, if we had more frequent inspections of landlords who had bad records. And if we have if that requires more frequent inspections, that does require higher costs, that we do incur higher costs. So I think there are probably ways around this. And also I would suggest that being threatened with a lawsuit is not the worst thing in the world. Having a city where a part of it has people living in third world conditions is a lot worse than being threatened with a lawsuit. And I don't know if I've told this story in public. Maybe I've told it to a couple of you. I want to go back. I'm going to go back 35 years because this is relevant history. In our neighborhood, we asked, several of us, after we had moved into these historic old homes in what is now the Urbana Historic District, this had all been zoned at a higher density. We moved in, we fixed up or we maintained these homes, and then we asked the city for zoning protection. We asked for the city to give us residential zoning. And we were told by the city planners that this was spot zoning and couldn't be done. It was against good planning practice. We were told by the then city attorney, advised us that there was a developer threatening legal action. We were told by the then city attorney that if we persisted in this and if the council agreed with us, that we would be sued by that developer and the city would lose. And he told the city council that. Fortunately, we had a brave enough city council. We had a brave enough city council that they went against that legal advice, and we have an Urbana Historic District, which we would not have today. So being threatened with, and that developer, he valued his reputation more than he valued whatever he could have gotten out of that lawsuit. That developer today is one of the most respected developers in the city. He's somebody whom Esther calls out by name as an outstanding developer. Everything about that came out good because we ignored the legal advice and we went ahead and did what we thought was, and asked the council to do what we thought was the right thing for the city. And by goodness, if we have to get threatened with lawsuits and maybe even undergo lawsuits to show people that we mean business in getting that part of the city cleaned up, then let's do it. And maybe my language is inviting a lawsuit, but by goodness, we've got to get that thing done.
Okay, Carol, did you want to say something?
I just had one question for Libby and one comment. The problem landlords that, of course, your department has been working on, did you give us a number of how many that actually is? How many problem landlords that you're dealing with on a regular basis?
We really haven't quantified. You know, over the years, we've had some that have posed concerns, and we've had discussions about those, but it's problematic to label in that way. I think you can look at our classifications, which are online, and look at the ones with the lower classifications, and that would give you a sense of the high performing versus the lower performing, if that helps.
I couldn't make heads or tails of it, but that's probably an internal thing because I don't know anything about, you know, the whole ABC kind of thing. But
we can maybe send that to you and annotate the owners if that would help you.
I think we've also dealt with the issue of repeat visits, that there will be increasing fees for repeat visits. So we, you know, through all these discussions, we have made a lot of changes.
I just wanted to just final comment. I on one part of it, of course, I certainly see the validity of increasing the penalty for noncompliance. But the other part of it, for those who I represent, the potential of passing on additional costs to the renters is really high from my perspective. And it's very difficult for me to talk to people and say, well, we need this increase in rental registration fee so we can hire this new inspector. And they say, well, then I'm going to have to pay for this new inspector, and then I'm still having problems with this, you know, this landlord, which really just causes major problems for low-income families. And so I wish I could just split the question and split the ordinance, but I can't split that in order to just vote for the increased fees and then as far as penalties, and then vote against the rental registration increase. But because they're connected, I have to reject the whole piece at this point and can't support it with the rental registration increase.
Okay, Libby?
And I'm not trying to rebut in any fashion, but I would point out that there are tangible benefits to the tenants of the program in creating safer housing, and more frequent inspections, and abilities to get improvements that they may need. In terms of, it is a fee for the property owner, and it's a cost of doing business in Urbana, just like insurance or other legal costs, whatever that you would need to be in the business of renting property. So it's certainly not intended to trickle down to the tenants, and I would hope that it wouldn't but there are many costs to doing this type of business. Again, insurance, legal, professional, other registrations, taxes. It's a big bundle. So it's a weighing process of the benefit to your constituents or the tenants versus the cost.
I think Charlie was next.
Yeah, I understand Eric's point. But at the same time, if we can accomplish what the motion is meant to do by separate direction to staff, which we do all the time, then I think it's probably advisable that we have a motion removing the amendment officially done here tonight, because we had a motion officially putting it in the document. So we really need to remove it.
Okay, there should be a motion to remove it from the document and then a motion to do the study, right?
And you also want to pass the ordinance.
Right, but that would, you could, if you want to do this part first, I think it makes perfect sense.
Okay, so I will sadly move to remove my amendment.
Okay, there's a motion to remove Mr. Jacobson's amendment, and
I
that's been
request a roll
seconded
call,
by
please.
Mr. Smythe. Yes, we have a roll call, please. Carol.
When you, okay, this is more parliamentarian. When you make a motion and that motion passes, now we are 2 weeks from the motion that was put forth. Isn't it required that you do a motion to reconsider on that to remove it?
We have the ordinance on the agenda, and so if
Right,
you
but
want
the
to.
actual language is not
I know.
actually in the ordinance.
Well, we think it should be. It should have been, so we think it's there, and everybody knows what it is, so we're going to remove it and then vote on it separately. And then we'll vote on the ordinance. I think we can get it done that way. And if we get sued, we get sued, right?
I prefer not to be
Okay,
sued.
I understand that, but
it-
sometimes we do. But I understand what you're saying, but we have a motion on the floor. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on that? Yes, Diane.
Well, first of all, for the record, I did not receive a copy of the ordinance in my packet. So I was going under the assumption, I'm not even sure, I was going under the assumption that I didn't even remember Eric's.
Well, we assume that his
So-
amendment is in that ordinance.
Okay, so
unless it gets taken out.
So the ordinance before us
Has
on
his
our
amendment.
agenda has the
Yes,
amendment
because
in
that's
it.
how
Okay.
it was in the
All
city
right, that's
council,
fine.
before it was
I remember
deferred.
very clearly
Yeah.
what the
Okay,
thing says. All right.
Mike.
My
I have one more-
my last email was that Libby said she would have a written amendment for us. Is that
Yeah, it was, but anyway,
distributed?
go ahead, Libby.
I have this if it would be helpful. It's from your previous packet, but
No, it was never in our previous packet with my amendment.
tonight's packet, you're right, exactly, so.
Yeah.
is that okay?
What, you want to pass out the revised one?
Yeah, if it were to pass, this is.
Well, it just might be
Cleaner?
appropriate.
Yeah, okay.
To pass it out and then
So we all
vote
have
it up
to-
or down, right?
May I
Well,
make
amend
a-
it, you can amend it.
May I make?
Yeah, right,
So it's
exactly.
The new section 2.
All right, here it is, the corrected one. Thank you. Which is now going to be revised. That's right, now we have it, now we'll take it out. Okay, any other discussion on this motion to take out the amendment?
Okay, the amendment, for your information, is section 2.
Okay,
Section
take
2 is
out
my
section 2. Okay? All right, and would the clerk please?
Well, I have a motion.
You want to defer it?
Yeah? No?
No. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah. But
You
yeah, I
can't
don't
defer,
think
you
that's
can't defer
probably
the
in
ordinance.
order, right?
It was a joke, it was only a joke.
It was a good one.
Yeah, sometimes I
Um,
get good ones.
I would move to amend Eric's amendment by retaining the first sentence of the amendment. I don't think that a sunset in any way, shape, or form, a one-year sunset, any way, shape, or form, would present a legal problem for the
Okay,
city.
would you accept that as a friendly
I
amendment?
accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Now, is that agreeable with your second? Mr. Smythe?
I was discussing something else related
Okay,
here, so.
Mr.
clarif-
Madigan has offered a friendly amendment. The rate schedule for this ordinance shall expire in 1 year, that portion of Section 2 should be maintained, and the rest of it deleted.
I have
that
a
okay?
question. Okay, so my only question about doing time would be the timing, whether 1 year is sufficient, or whether we need a little bit more time to, say 15 months
I
to get a
think-
full measure.
My-
here. So
1 year is
The
fine,
intent of
don't you
my
think?
motion is to allow the fee to, and I'm still not going to vote for this. I know that's no surprise. But my motion, the intent of my motion is to allow the fee to be assessed for 1 year and then be up for review
Sure.
based upon what's not going to be in the ordinance about directing the staff to analyze this and give a thoughtful approach to, Eric's concerns, which I share, about the equity of the fees and the fines, and can we approach this in a better way, or is this the way to go? So a 1-year sunset, I think, is appropriate.
Are you okay with that, Charlie?
Yeah, except I think the actual date might actually be a little shorter. We need to relate it to the
October 15th is the
cycle.
renewal.
The cycle is the 15th, so it should actually simply just be it shouldn't be that it expires in 1 year. That it expires.
How about, let's say,
at the end of the inspection of the rental registration cycle.
with leave of the council, I would amend my motion to state that the rate schedule for this ordinance shall be in effect for 1 year in accordance with the current rate schedule.
Okay.
Is that
Does work?
acceptable to the maker and the seconder? Okay. All right. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Well, hang on.
There's more? Oh,
I just thought that was contradictory because the current rate schedule before this is passed is a lower
Okay.
fees.
Well, you tell me how it should be worded. What I'm
Okay.
trying to get at is you're about ready to issue the rates, right, for the next 12 months?
how about if you
So-
said she'll be reviewed in 1 year? Would that do it?
No.
No,
That's-
I would
that's
rather,
expired.
I would rather it expire.
Okay.
And I think that the intent here, however it shall be worded, is that, okay,
How about the rate schedule for this ordinance shall be in effect for the 2013-14 rental registration program year?
that's 100% acceptable to me.
Okay, is that acceptable to Mr.?
Except what does it revert back to?
It doesn't, we have to consider it. If it
Well-
expires, then when we're up to look at it and see what we want to do with it.
If we don't do anything
Keep it or
prior.
change it.
Right. If we don't do anything prior to this time next year, it reverts to what it is right now.
Right,
Okay.
okay. Carol?
I just really hate to open this can of worms, but my understanding of raising or even putting these fees here is in relationship to hiring another staff person. So if you do that, not that I'm opposed to the rental registration anyway, but if you do that, then you have a new staff person that you've brought on under this auspices, and then what do you do with that?
Well, you're either
just
happy
not-
with how the program's going, or you think you need to change the program. So it just gives you a stop where you look at it and say, what do we want to do for the next year?
No, we don't do that. That's the
Well,
point.
I
We
mean,
don't do that.
it's very reasonable to reevaluate something after a year. So we just want to define what the year is and we have that language, correct?
Now, there will be another review of the fee schedule at budget time. That's the ordinary time to look at those. So we would, under this proposal, we would have these increased rates in the fee schedule, probably with a note saying to be reevaluated by October, prior to
Then
October.
I would be willing to amend my motion by saying that I would amend Section 2. I would move to amend Section 2 of this ordinance to say that the rate schedule for this ordinance shall expire upon 1 year unless it is reevaluated within the current, reevaluated within the deliberation regarding fees. Help me out here. Within the normal.
Budget cycle for fees?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be a year. It can be, this fee is going to into effect now, but we have, well, here's my difficulty with this. So most of the fees we deal with are dealt with on a fiscal year basis. This one is not. So what you're saying is we can't have something different? I don't know. I think maybe, thinking out loud here, we ought to just keep it at the 1 year. And when the budget rolls around, this is one of those things that rolls for 3 or 4 more months.
This would make it expire on October 21st.
Right.
2014, which I think is perfectly adequate because we will be able to look
Right.
at this.
Or what we could do is, we could, at budget time, we could say, guess what?
We want to change it.
We're all happy with what's going on, and we're going to roll it into the current budget and modify the ordinance accordingly.
So I love the simplicity and elegance of the first sentence I wrote.
All right. Libby,
I think unless it talks about the increases in this rate schedule rather than the rate schedule, because if the rate schedule expires, then we know it. Some reading would be that we then no longer have any rental registration fee
Well,
and therefore no program.
I think that we will evaluate it in a year. So,
The increases in the rate schedule for this ordinance shall be in effect for the 2013-14 rental registration program
so
year.
do you
If
want it
it's-
to be the increases, Eric, or you want it to be the
Yeah,
whole
otherwise
rates?
there's no schedule.
You want it to be the increase, you want it to be the increases?
Sure. The increases in the rate schedule for this ordinance shall expire in 1 year.
The rate schedule increases,
The rate schedule increases in this ordinance shall expire in 1 year.
okay.
So just add one word.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Charlie?
Okay, there's one more unexpected consequence here, sorry. And you know, it's item, if you look above at the registration fees, it's A, B, C, and D that this really goes after. I think there's general agreement that E, F, G, H, and I were acceptable increases to everybody, regardless. So,
Okay, you want to say
I would-
increases in items A through E?
You know what? I
Is that what
think
you
I'm
want?
the one who has the motion.
well, no, actually, it's Eric's
It's
original.
really-
I move to amend it, but I mean, if
but
I'll
no.
withdraw everything I said and I defer to the guy who.
Okay.
Yeah,
So.
because I'm on
Okay,
board
so
with
you've
that.
changed, okay, the rate, we currently have the rate schedule increase for this ordinance shall expire in 1 year. But I've just pointed out that E, F, G, H, and I were, I think, acceptable to everybody beforehand.
Okay,
Uh,
so in
uh,
sections
so-
A through D?
So it's really A through D increases in this ordinance shall expire in 1 year. Is that acceptable, Eric?
Is that okay?
Just a second.
first?
Yes,
The
yes,
first
because
floor, okay.
I guess the answer to this is that is acceptable because E through I all are related to, things that people do wrong. A through D is a rain that falls on the innocent and the guilty alike. So
That's how rain falls. That's why we have a stormwater utility.
Okay, so I think if
Okay,
I
I think
understand
we're
it
set,
correctly,
right?
if I understand correctly, the section 2 is being amended to say the rate schedule increases for sections A through D listed above in section 1 of this ordinance shall expire in 1 year.
okay, that's perfect, Charlie. You lose your bet incidentally.
Yeah.
Okay, Carol wants one more.
I'll just make a final comment on it. I would certainly in another year. I appreciate the work to try to amend this to make it make sense. I think I can really be comfortable moving in another year to see how that impacts people and know that it expires. That's important for me because I've been on county board and all these places where they tell you one thing and the next thing you know, that thing never expires. So putting that in here certainly makes me more comfortable and more willing to support it today with a clear expiration and review in a year.
So
Okay,
we need
we
to
have a
vote on the
motion.
amendment. Do you still want a roll call on the amendment?
Sure, why not? He asked for a roll call, let's have a roll call. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Okay, now, he actually asked for a roll call on the very first portion of that motion
Yeah,
when Eric asked that.
Okay, do you still want a roll call, sir?
No.
All right. Then, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Well, that motion carries. Now, you want to have, Bill
Back to the main
Brown,
motion.
sorry.
So I'm in favor of this still. This is actually, when you calculate it, 50 cents per month per unit increase. I think that can be absorbed either by the property owner or by the tenants if it gets passed down. In exchange, we get 3 inspectors instead of 2, and we'll be able to get through the inspection cycle hopefully in 6 years rather than 8 or whatever it's taking. Hopefully within a year or two, get through the rest of them that have never been inspected. And I think being able to get through them in a reasonable time frame is important because places like Woodstone and Silver and Vaudar areas probably didn't ever get inspected until they started having severe problems. So I think it's important to catch those maintenance problems early. So I'm still going to support this. Thanks.
Okay,
Myself.
why don't we, who is next now here?
Diane.
Dennis? Diane or Dennis? Dennis? Go ahead.
And this is just, since we're in discussion and we're talking about items that have come up and under discussion, I'd just like to point out that I appreciate Eric Jacobson's very interesting historic lesson about being brave and going forward, whether you get sued or not, that you follow your principle. And I would like to just point out that in subsequent years, on a property in that district, the city did get sued by that landlord, and the city did lose. And so there is a little bit of history there that's very interesting concerning historic preservation qualities and the ultimate demolition of a home. So yes, the prophecy came true. The city was sued by that wonderful landlord, and the city lost.
Okay. But it was worth it, right?
You be the judge of that. I'm not saying that I agree with that, but we all see things differently.
Come on, we've got so many houses in there that are on your 100 most important houses list.
Okay,
That wasn't
so,
my list.
We had Diane, go ahead.
Well, I prefer we not get involved in any more lawsuits if we can help it. We've got enough on our
Yes.
plate as it is. My other comment is, and I had some discussions with staff today about my concern that going forward, we have a way to report the revenues and expenditures related to this program. And I understand we're working with finance to present that in like the supplementary expenditures report or something. Right now, it's just hard to see anywhere what the actual expenditures are for this particular program. So if we can figure out a way to report these revenues and expenses like we do for, say, the public arts program or something like that. So the public who's paying these fees and the council who's passing this legislation can actually, you know, get an accurate picture of this program. I think that's what we owe the public, and I do intend to support this.
Okay, and we are going to revise the whole budget process, so that should be, you know, suggestions from the council of what kind of information do you want, and certainly we could say how many buildings were inspected too.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that
And
is in the
the kind
building
of things that
safety
we
report,
find and the
but
kind of corrections that are being made.
there's a lot of good information already in the annual report from the Building Safety Division, but what's not anywhere that I could find is the revenues and expenditures for this particular program on one particular page. It's, you kind of, so anyway, should I make that suggestion to the Finance Department, or who do I?
You can make it to me. I
Okay.
already got your email,
Okay.
but we're already working on it, so I
Okay.
just wanted you to know
Great.
that.
Super.
But, you know, anybody who has a question about anything that you'd like to see the budget reflect, let me know, because we're in the process of revamping the whole system. Mike?
So I have a question. While I appreciate that this has been improved, and I really appreciate Eric's suggestion about a sunset, I think that is a very important piece of most new laws that are made. I think there ought to be a forced review, and this does that. But my question is, what do our neighbors to the west do regarding inspection of apartments? And once somebody answers that question, anybody, I don't care who, tell me how much more problem they have with rental property than the city of Urbana. I think that is something that has been absolutely unaddressed in this entire debate. Is there some kind of insidious problem in Champaign because they don't, oh, wait a minute, let me answer my own question. They don't have an inspection program. Do they have some kind of insidious, horrible problem that the city of Urbana, which, by the way, is 1/2 the size of Champaign because of decades of economic development to the west? Is there something I'm missing here that they're not doing that we are that's beneficial?
I think that they're not doing the kind of building inspections that we do, and I think our properties are in better shape. Charlie?
Do you have any
I'll also add-
actual
Well-
empirical evidence of
Well,
that?
that's what the tenant union tells us.
I
And they're
believe
very
that
familiar.
The tenant union is in the business of advocating for tenants which pay their way. So I'm not so sure that they're necessarily scientific in their responses to you.
Okay,
I
Charlie, and
think
then...
the issue
and
is that
Dennis.
Champaign is the only city in the state of Illinois with substantial university communities. Bloomington Normal, down south, Carbondale, DeKalb, Macomb, all have rental registration programs. All other university communities in the state of certain size and up all have rental registration except for Champaign.
Well,
So that's-
I'm
so-
not necessarily
so the,
asking who has it and who doesn't. I'm asking...
the rumor
is-
on the street is that people, you occasionally you talk to somebody and it's just hearsay to say, well, I wish we had better inspection of our properties, but that you get that from the occasional renter, and you can't substantiate it, you can't quantify it.
Well-
so, but the point is that they are the exception to the state rule.
Then maybe I guess what we ought to look at is, what is Champaign doing
Or not doing.
or not doing?
I can answer
Are they letting business take care of itself? And are they really having more problems than we are? I'm asking these questions because I think it's very important that Urbana start to take a look at how do we grow Urbana? How do we make this a better community? And I'm not so sure that the way to do that is to keep beating down people who do business in this city. And I think that everyone on this council should start to take more seriously the fact that rental property owners are businessmen in this city, businessmen, businesswomen in this city. They are an integral part of this city. How should we lessen the burden on them? How should we figure out, instead of increasing the size of government, how should we figure out how to reduce the size of government, reduce the government burden, reduce the onerous regulations that we impose on our citizens? And that is what ultimately ends up being higher cost for our residents. And guess what? That means we end up having less people who want to live here. That's how that boils down. And I think people need to start seriously understanding that how we grow this community, and I love Urbana. I live here, and I have my business here. I love this community. But we don't grow it by continuing to beat people down with fees and taxes. And that's what we're doing here. We all talk about quality of living. Let's talk about how we improve the quality of living. It's not by imposing more fees on landlords. It's by cracking down on the few who are horrible. The few. We're imposing a universal fee on everyone just because we need a new inspector. Because our inspectors can only work 218 days a year. Because that's the city standard, which is a very, very generous standard, by the way. No private business can possibly uphold that standard. And we ought to start acting like a business that can uphold a private sector standard. 218 days, not even close. All right? I know I'm on a little bit of a soapbox here.
You are.
I am just beside myself at all of this. I have to say, I'm beside myself. We
Okay.
need to start looking at how Urbana has not grown like Champaign has for the last 4 decades. And there's a reason. And you know what? The arts and all the things that we hold dear would be so much more benefited by a prosperous business community. And we're not fostering that here. We are not. We are just not. And this is a prime example of that.
Okay, do we have a motion for the ordinance itself?
Diane is on
Okay,
it.
but there,
Diane's on it.
okay, so someone has to make a motion for the ordinance?
Do you need a second?
Oh, it comes out of deferral? Oh, it's already on the floor, so.
I'll second it.
He's saying it was deferred, so it's already
It's already
here.
here.
There's already a motion that comes from being deferred. So, is there one other person who wants to talk? That is Dennis Roberts. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. And this is a period of discussion on the ordinance itself. And I would just like to comment that part of my ward is an area in this community that has suffered from a lack of the pride of the business community that owns and manages and runs large sections of rental properties in the Urbana area. And they have experienced the degradation of their properties. I'm not being listened to by the person I actually was trying to address.
Could we please not have the side conversations and listen to the speaker?
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you would respect my thoughts as I present this to the City Council's consideration. As I was saying, I represent in my ward people who have depended upon the largesse of the business community who are property owners and do rental properties to a large extent in certain areas of my ward, who have over the years gone through a series of different owners on the properties, who've seen the deterioration of their property, have lived in conditions that are less than favorable, and I don't think Mr. Magadan would like to move into an apartment in some of these communities, and he probably would be very upset if he had lived there for more than a month. But maybe this is an experience that he hadn't had before. But there needs to be a recourse for people who don't seem to have a voice in this community through financial security to have issues addressed that are incumbent upon the fact that their landlord is not taking care of the property, that they are making a profit without returning it to the upkeep of the property. And these issues seem to be only able to be addressed by some kind of review of the property, the standards of the property. And just as we value the fact that the health department will go into a restaurant and certify that it is a clean environment and a healthy environment to cook food and to serve it to the public, we also need somebody to watch out for the conditions in the community where the living quality of the people are directly affected. We have come upon the use of the rental registration as that tool. Maybe there's a better one. We haven't talked about that yet. Maybe we'll have a conversation about that someday in the future. But currently, this is the tool that we used. And we've had several different apartment buildings in my ward that were in pathetic shape, turned around and made into decent living conditions again because they were inspected by this ordinance. And okay, I'm not real excited about raising the fees, but I will accept the fact that we're going to have a one-year review to see if it's effective. But I do think it's important to have strong fines. And I support Esther Pat and her opinion of that. The fine structure needs to make a significant dent in the consciousness of the individual who is the renter of these properties, so that if they're failing an inspection, and if the safety equipment within the building, the fire alarms, the hallway lights, the electrical outlets, the security cameras or whatever are in bad condition, that they should indeed be asked to fix them. I think that's not unreasonable for public health and security and safety. So sometimes being regulated brings health and wellness to the community in ways that it would not normally be achieved if we let business take care of itself. When it comes to like shopping in a store, no problem. Let the price of the object be set by the businesses. But when it comes to the quality of life in your apartment, in your kitchen, in your bathroom, then let's step in and make sure that everybody has at least a fair chance to have decent living. So I will support this.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, my name was used in debate, so I have the right to respond.
I think you've talked a great
Under
deal,
Robert's
Mr.
rules, my name was
Madigan.
used in debate, so I have the right to respond.
Your name was used in debate?
Yes.
Did you use-
I said that I was referring to something.
No, you said my name.
Everybody gets
Okay,
two opportunities.
all right.
Now listen
ahead.
again.
Mr.
I
Madigan.
just want to say a couple of things. Dennis, I appreciate your comments, but I don't want to be misconstrued. I am not saying that some regulation is not appropriate. What I'm saying is we ought to compare ourselves to our sister city that is much more prosperous by anybody's stretch of the imagination in the last several decades in terms of economic development, and they don't have a program. What we probably ought to look at in this 1 year, instead of just proliferating a more onerous and a more restrictive registration program, is something that's limited, something that does concentrate on quality of living with regard to the more distressed properties in the city. But what we are talking about here is not that. What we're talking about here is increasing fees on the good landlords, not just on the distressed properties. We're talking about everybody. We're talking about raising everyone's rent, and we have a huge portion of this city that pays rent. And don't anybody here be under the illusion that this will not be passed on, because it will. So it's not a cost of doing business for the landlords, be they good landlords, be they questionable, or be they bad. It will be passed on. The residents of Urbana, through their rent, will pay this increase. And I'm not so sure, actually, I'm frankly 100% sure that this is not the way to go. The way to go is to go after the folks who are causing the problem, not everyone. And that's what actually all of you will be voting yes for, is to raise the fees for good landlords to pay for what's happening and is being caused by, frankly, almost 100% of the time, tenants upon even the bad landlords. This is not, in most cases, neglect on the landlord's part. It's repeated abuse by bad tenants. And we are failing to address that on a monumental basis.
Okay, we have an ordinance. Would the clerk please call the roll? This is the amended ordinance number 2013-10-093, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 14, Section 14-7, regarding the schedule of fees, the annual rental property registration. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Now, is there a motion, Mr. Jacobson?
Yes, so I move that, where's this wording? Yeah, but I'm going to modify mine a little bit to make it more lawsuit-proof. So it's a motion to direct the staff to report to the council prior to the expiration of the increased rate schedule on the feasibility of establishing a rate schedule such that property owners whose management incurs higher inspection costs to pay the full rate, while property owners whose management does not incur above average inspection costs shall pay a reduced rate.
Is there a second? Seconded by Charlie Smythe. Any discussion? Oh, Carol.
I guess I just had a question. I think that's what leads back to this in review. What's the determining factor on that? How do you determine that?
So I think the feasibility, I think we would ask staff to come back with, I think that it's logical that landlords who have more violations, and especially more violations that they do not correct in a timely way, to be subject to more inspections. And more inspections costs more money. So the thrust of Mr. Simon's memo on my amendment was that our action a sliding fee schedule might be justified if we could justify it in terms of the costs, so that it's not punitive, it's not a punishment, but it's in recognition of the costs that are incurred by the city in terms of in terms of providing good housing. So I've modified my wording in such a way as to ask staff to actually do two things. One is implement an inspection schedule which takes into account the landlord behavior, record of violations, record of especially uncorrected violations, and to come back with a suggested fee schedule which would reflect the extra costs of more frequent inspection of the problem landlords.
Okay. Diane Moreland.
Just a question, and it's a logistical one. Realistically, the inspectors are not going to get to all 8,900 rental properties in the city of Urbana over the next year. So how would you develop a fee schedule based on a partial list of inspections?
So I think I would answer that in two ways. One is maybe they don't need to get to all 8,000 in a year. Maybe that's not the right goal. Maybe the goal is to really focus on the landlords who have a record of creating major problems, who have a record of creating serious problems that are beyond the tenant's control. So, for example, I mean, there's one case that I know of very well where there's a building where it's an apartment building, but the roof leaks. And the tenants in the apartments under that, there's water coming in every time it rains. It's coming through their roofs, their ceilings are crumbling. There's nothing the tenants can do about that. So that person, that unit, that building really needs a lot of pressure.
Right, but my question is, a lot of these buildings have never been inspected, especially I think a lot of the single-family homes and duplexes in East Urbana. That's an area that just no one's gotten to in a long time. So we don't know, well, we can guess what's out there, but we don't know until you get into those houses. So by focusing on, okay, a leaking roof as a result of a tenant complaint is an easy thing to address, but most tenants don't complain. I mean, I've been a landlord for 40 years, and a lot of tenants just don't report problems. So you don't find them serious problems until you actually go out and inspect. But we are not going to inspect the majority of the places in Urbana that have never had an inspection next year. So I'm just asking logistically, how do you develop a fee schedule based on the bad apples when we don't know all the bad apples?
We don't
and
know.
Then it's patently unfair to focus on a few people while the rest are not looked at. So I don't know. I would have trouble supporting this particular motion.
Well, I think you'll find that in the study, correct?
Well, I think that's right. So it may be that the study is going to come back. I'm asking for a feasibility study. The study may come back with the conclusion that, we really can't do that we really can't do that. We'd be spread so thin, we'd be leaving a lot of, the study may come back with, I don't think it's unfair to focus on really, really bad landlords. That's not unfair. Also, I think that if we can correct the behavior of the really bad landlords, then we can start to, inspect more broadly, because once that behavior is corrected, we don't have to inspect them so often, and then we should be able to branch out.
Well, our mandatory fine schedule with the increased fines for failure to comply with violations actually is the main way we're going to address those really bad landlords. But now I just am a little fearful about using the rental registration ordinance as an enforcement tool. It's our source of information, but our enforcement tool are the fines that we passed before. So that's
Okay,
just my
I think
concern.
that Bill Brown was next.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fine schedule is probably going to effectively do the same thing. I mean, I don't mind doing the study, but as it is now, I think the C properties are supposed to get inspected more frequently, like every year, every 2 years, and they have been. I think I didn't see any C properties that hadn't been inspected more than 2 years. So, and then if they continue to get Cs, they'll get fines because that means they've had violations. Even if they get Bs, they've had a violation, so they'll get fines. So I think the bad properties will be fined more, and I think that'll basically happen. But you know, if you want to have a study on it, it doesn't bother me.
I'm really only asking for a study, and honestly, I am open-minded. If this comes back and says, you know, we could do everything that we want to with fines, then I think the question is, well, I don't know. Let's just look at the data and see what we can do. But I really think there really is a fairness question with raising the registration on everybody because of the sins of a few. Now, sometimes that's necessary. My issue is that I have not been convinced that is absolutely necessary. I'm open to be convinced, but I haven't seen the data yet that convinced me of that.
Dennis Roberts.
Yeah, okay, I can support collecting data and maybe getting feedback from staff about maybe advice, direction, you know, from staff after having received that information. And yes, I can see that you know, it's not going to be complete data of the entire body of rentals in the city of Urbana because of the number that we deal with. You know, maybe the study can go back to previous years and use that data as well. We don't want to. I don't think I would advise searching out only the worst landlords to make the study or get this information, particularly because I think we're going to fall back into the same trap that our legal advisor warned us against, which is basically selecting and focusing on a particular class of landlords to come up with data or a solution which may be predetermined. And I think that there are you know, it's possible that somebody who is reviewed and doesn't like the results, and then, you know, their data is used on this, you know, for this study, or to change to start addressing a sliding fine scale, could lead to just as many problems as we're trying to avoid. So let's wait until the data comes in and just kind of evaluate it in a year.
Okay, I think Libby wants to say something.
And this is not pertaining to the feasibility study, but since we were talking about council goals earlier and different work plan items, I've made a list of the things that have been asked of staff in the last 4 months pertaining to rental registration that will take some time. That was not required 4 months ago, say. Number one, we have a new fine schedule that's a lot more complicated than what we were using before. It's got 3 different types of violations and then 2 different timeline trigger points. So the fine exaction and collection will be more time consuming. It's a new program. We have a requirement to report back on the effectiveness of that in April. That's going to take some time to analyze. Every 2 months, we are to report on the fines. This is just a spreadsheet, but we need finance to generate the fines that have been assessed. In less than a year, our fee increase will expire. We'll need to do an evaluation on the effectiveness of that fee increase or problems with it. We're adding in the fee increase reinspection fees that we didn't previously have, so we need to create a way to assess those reinspection fees, a way to exact them and then to collect them and to track them. We have to work with finance on the budget of the program, but then also do a revenue analysis, and some of those revenues will be hard to track. I mean, these are all, there's nothing wrong with these ideas, but they're all adding up to time. And then now the feasibility study, because we want to find a way to have rental registration, you know, be more equitable with the good versus the bad landlords. We want to improve the ordinance itself. That's in the goals. And then on top of all of this, we have a real problem in the Silver Water area that's going to take concentrated effort by the same people who will be doing these other studies and analyses. And to get our numbers up, it's going to be tricky, and we do have some staff vacancies and some other important goals that we discussed tonight on economic development and the tax base. So I don't want to throw a cold, wet towel on anything. I felt that I wanted to let you know that I've been kind of trying to keep track of all the things that we need to get done.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Madigan.
Libby, I hate to sound confrontational, but how much of this have you asked for? And how much of this are we now suggesting that be added on? I mean, I think a lot of this is staff generated. You're on one hand saying, gee, we want all of this extra stuff, but on the other hand, we don't want all the extra. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude.
Staff wants
I'm really
what
not.
council wants. You know,
No, hang on. I think
Mr.
a lot
Madigan,
of this,
I think it's council generated, really.
No, I don't think any of this is, frankly. I think a lot of this has come from staff. So I'm just asking.
You know, the staff really wants to do the inspections, and we want to increase the number of systematic inspections. We want a safe building stock, and we want adequate staffing to accomplish that. So to answer your question, that was always something that I felt that I wanted to present to the council.
I guess in fairness here, what are we suggesting that you do on the list that you just read? What are we suggesting that you do that is above and beyond what you've asked for?
Well, again, I think the request from the staff was to increase our capacity for systematic inspections and to deal with some of the problem properties that we had.
But, okay, so us asking you to actually report back to us about, with some empirical evidence of the effectiveness of those requests is an additional burden?
You know, it's fine to ask for this, and we're happy to provide. I'm just pointing out that some of these things will be more complicated, and we had been doing reporting, but this is a whole other level of reporting.
Okay, but
and
I mean,
study.
I think you understand where maybe some of us are coming from, that as people who are part-time representatives of the folks who live here and pay taxes, that all we're asking for is, wow, we're taking a leap of faith here. Maybe that's not the right word. We are embarking upon an expanded regulatory program that is largely the request of staff. So we're just asking for, some kind of statistical evaluation of that program in a year. But I'm getting the sense that there's pushback in how shall I put this? In a way, there's pushback saying, we won't have time to tell you whether or not what we're asking for is effective. And I don't know. I hope that's not what I'm hearing. It seems to me that's what I'm hearing.
It was just a list of the requests, a simple list, not editorialized, a list of the requests in the last 4 months. No pushback intended.
There is more and more asked to be done. There was a lot of public concern, and we're responding to the public concern, and it does take more staff time. More complicated timings on fees and fines, that all takes more time. One thing we're going to do is meet with entrepreneur at the university about electronic reporting to try to take some of the burden off. But the more information we ask for, it's legitimate information, but it does take people to do it. Carol Ammons.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask for a close of debate on this question and ask the clerk to call the actual outstanding motion to a vote.
Could someone repeat that motion, please?
That's what I'm...
To close debate.
And ask for the repeating of the motion, please.
The motion on the floor is the ordinance number 2013-10-093.
No, we
So
passed that.
Oh, we already passed it. Okay,
Yeah,
then
it's
what are we
the
talking
motion
about
on
here?
the floor is my
Oh,
request for the
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. It is your motion.
Right.
Okay. So I think we've talked about this enough. Do you need a second to that, or?
I
what?
think I've been seconded.
To
yeah.
close the debate is the question. Do you need
Oh.
a second to that?
No, you don't need
Okay.
a second. You
All
can
right.
chair that.
All right, let's just close the debate now. I think we've had a lot of discussion on this. This is just a simple motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying
Can you please
aye.
repeat the motion so we know what we're voting on?
Okay, the motion is to have a study, correct, Mr. Jacobson? Would
The-
you like to read it?
Yeah, I move we direct staff to report to council prior to the year being out on the feasibility of establishing a rate schedule such that property owners whose management of their properties incurs more inspection costs shall pay a higher registration fee than property managers whose management incurs a lower than average inspection costs.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by voting, by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay, maybe we'll have a show of hands. How many are in favor of this motion? 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the motion carries. Reports of standing committees. Who chaired the
Yes, that's
committee of
me.
the whole? Bill
Uh,
Brown.
Yeah, we met last week, October 14th, and we forwarded a number of items to council, all for approval. So we're one ordinance down and like 9 to go.
Okay, let's whip through these.
First up is ordinance number 2013-10-097, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing number of Class R liquor licenses for Suwon Lu, DBA Tang Dynasty, 140 Lincoln Square. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, I believe Mr. Madigan has recused himself.
Right.
He's not here. Okay, would the clerk please call the roll? Okay.
I'm sure that's why he left. Yeah.
Yeah,
He didn't
has to
say
say
it,
it.
so
he
I
has a
can't put it in
standing
mine.
conflict of interest.
Ms. Ammons,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Marlin,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Smythe,
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next is ordinance number 2013-10-098, an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Section 2-998 of the Urbana Code of Ordinances relating to civil service, veterans preference.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I think he made the motion. He makes the
Oh,
motion
second,
on
I'm sorry,
behalf
yes.
of the
For the
committee.
committee, I move
Second.
We're
approval.
moving on.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Ammons,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Madigan,
Yes.
Ms. Marlin,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Smythe.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Next, we have two ordinances concerning purchase and lease of Heimberger Farms on Olympian Drive. We'll do them separately. First is ordinance number 2013-10-099, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of certain real estate, Heimberger Farm. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Marlin. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That motion carries.
Then we have ordinance number 2013-10-095, an ordinance authorizing the lease of certain real estate, Heimberger Farm. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Roberts. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That
Yes.
motion carries.
Next, we have ordinance number 2013-10-096, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for purchase of large log splitter. For the committee, I move approval.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Smythe. Is that correct? Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That motion carries.
Now we have a resolution number 2013-10-051R, a resolution authorizing and approving an agreement with the Urbana Park District, Sculpture in Martin Luther King Park. For the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by
Well, could be
Ro-
me.
Roberts?
I'll take it.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe? Mayor Pressing?
Yes. That motion carries.
Next, we have resolution number 2013-10-052R, a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority of Champaign County regarding redevelopment of Aspen Court and Urbana townhomes. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Brown, seconded by Ammons. Any discussion? Brown. Mr. Brown.
We did last week have a question about density, so I did, I checked on my maps, and I think Crystal View Townhomes runs about 10 to 12 units per acre, and that was kind of the target kind of development we were thinking about. The current density of Urbana Townhomes was 35 to 42 units per acre, so it's about 1/3 to 1/4 of what it was currently.
Okay. Anyone else? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Just have to
Okay.
say it carries.
Just a question of whether the mayor had to vote on that one. Guess not. Okay, Mr. Brown.
Next is resolution number 2013-10-053R, a resolution determining the amounts of money necessary to be raised by the tax levy 2013. For the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Excuse me, the resolution in your packet has a slight amendment. It includes the percentage that the levy represents compared to the extension in the most recent tax year. So it doesn't change the overall amounts any, but you should approve this as amended.
Okay.
Paragraph C is the change paragraph.
Do I need to,
Why don't you make a motion to approve the amended version, I guess?
so for the committee, I move that we approve the amended version showing the percentage reductions.
Second.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Marlin. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
That motion carries.
Finally, we have resolution number 2013-10-054R, a resolution deeming certain funds in the Special Tax Allocation Fund for the Downtown Urbana Tax Increment Redevelopment Project area as surplus funds and directing the payment and distribution thereof, 2013. For the committee, I move approval.
Okay, motion by Brown, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
Yes.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
That motion carries. Okay, we're on to reports of special committees. No reports. Reports of officers. Libby Tyler, Director of Community Development.
This is a reminder that there's a bicycle planning workshop tomorrow night at the Urbana Civic Center at 7 p.m. And Ed Barsati with the Illinois Bicycle League?
League of Illinois Bicyclists.
League of Illinois Bicyclists will be here to talk about bicycle planning, so hope you can all attend.
Okay, thank you, Libby. Any other reports of officers? Okay. We move on to new business. There's one item, mayoral appointment to the Plan Commission, Maria Bindum.
I'd move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that motion carries. Thank you very much. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.